and welcome to Tabletop 24. I'm Alan.
I'm John.
And I'm Brian.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of We'll Play Again. Today we have the Red Cathedral from De Beer Games. Now, this is one John picked up, so I'm going to let him lead away with the House of the Wise.
So, 2 to 4 players, about an hour to play. Quite easy to teach, quite a simple rule book, about 70 pages, so I reckon we could learn it in half an hour, teach it in about 10 to 15 minutes. The key points are you have guilds around the board that give you actions that you can do. You roll your dice, you move them around, you take the resource, double if there's 2 dice within that resource. You put banners onto the cathedral, and then the adornments, and you score points between the two.
Yeah.
It's quite simple.
So it takes about 10 minutes to set up everything, and as you can see, it's probably sort of on the smaller side of sort of footprint of games.
Apart from the cathedral cards, which is variable, and that can take the game quite far out.
Yeah.
But yeah, this bit here is quite small.
Again, another one of those, if you're sat at the opposite side of the table, it could be quite hard to see what was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously Teardown is pretty much stuff it back in the bag. It's a baggies type game. So it's just putting everything away from there. And probably a couple of minutes just to reset it to go again if you wanted to go straight away.
Yeah, it basically means putting these randomised tokens back on the set of cards, maybe take a new layout of the cathedral, and then reorganising all the adornments back onto your board again. So not too
bad.
Too long.
No.
Yeah.
No. So obviously, how did we find it? So Brian.
So the pros then, I think the dice mechanic is really interesting. So this is how you get your resources. So you suddenly move the dice, how many spots on the dice, move it forward 3, and then you take resources that you find yourself in, and then immediately roll the dice, place it back in there for the next time. The next person can pick any kind of dice they like, and again try to find the resources. You're trying to get the resources to buy or to build sections of the cathedral that you need to get on the cards. And I thought that was quite interesting. There's ways to modify how many times you can move the dice as well. So if I'm red, for example, so I can spend money to move the red dice a bit more to get more reach with the dice. So I found it took a bit of thinking about. There's a lot of counting involved. So counting the spaces to understand which die to move to get the best result for yourself. But I thought that was quite interesting as a way to get resources rather than just worker placement thing. And there's different ways of getting there as well. So I like that.
Yeah, I think the only thing that sort of frustrates on the dice, like you say, you've rolled those there, and I could have been planning out what I wanted, and it then changes the whole thing. So there's potentially mucks up people a little bit.
Yeah, you can't plan too far ahead potentially. Yeah, so yeah. Yeah,
but I do like the variety here. There's a lot of bits that are not present on this board because we've set it up differently. You'll get another layout of the cathedral. You can pick up the different guild members, and the resources are randomised to their positions. So there's quite a bit of variety in the game itself. So that's quite nice to see. It's a lot in a small box.
Yeah, there is a lot to this in a small box. For me, there's a disconnect between the two halves and the cathedral and the board. The dice mechanic is nice. Maybe if the board was bigger and it was all contained within one board, it wouldn't have that disconnect. I just feel there's a bit of a disjoint between the two for me. It's also a lot heavier than you think. There's a lot of consideration and thinking that you have to do within the game. And although it is a tableau builder and you have the board in front of you, there is more interaction between players than you would find on some other games where you're just looking at what you need to do in front of you. That said, it's not one that I particularly enjoyed playing. I'll be honest about it. I didn't think there was much of the flow felt wrong for me between the two parts. Sometimes you're left and you can't get the bits you want, so you're struggling to do things. So yeah, the flow between the two parts I think I struggled with, and I just didn't feel it was as connected as it could be.
So in terms of the player interaction, one of the sort of selling points that seemed to be in this game, reading the rules, was if you build sections before somebody else can build a section below you, they get penalised for it quite heavily. But when it came down to the points, it wasn't that much of a deterrent really. There's 2 types of scoring mechanisms around the board. There's recognition points, which are these small spaces in between, and then there's prestige points, which are these big eagle points. And you lost points, but you only lost the small recognition points. So at the beginning of the game, it didn't seem to be severe enough to worry about it. So there was no incentive really for me as a player to bother building my sections earlier. And that could have been more interesting if that was a bit more severe.
Yeah, I think in our last play you got hit with a couple of them, didn't you? But overall, he didn't really change positions in the game.
No.
So, like I say, there's a lot going on in respects of variety and stuff you can do, and I think the game really benefits from a long-term strategy. So you're setting yourself up with where do you want to go, how you want to get there. Now, you're not always going to get the resources you want because the dice are going to be rolled, but you can get something that you kind of could then work to. So I did find that a long-term strategy really helped, and it enables that long-term strategy. So it's got that bigger game, bigger Euro feel to it. But on the flip side, I think it's trying to be a really large Euro in a small box, and I think it fails on both parts because it's a small box and a small footprint. You've got the two disconnected areas, like John says, and I think it's not got enough weight for it to be a big Euro game. And there's a lot of decisions in there, but I just think there's too much luck with the dice to then become a proper Euro game.
You've got to keep an eye on the end game scoring as well. So you basically get points depending on how much you control each tower, and the scoring there is a bit complicated. So you add up all the scores you could have got and then halve it if you both got equal points. And that, I think, caught people out a few times in terms of, I didn't realise I didn't control that tower enough to get the points that I need.
Yeah.
So that's where repeated play you'd learn more about that. But that's also, if you're playing the game, maybe, 6 or 7th time against somebody who's not played it before, you'll just, have an advantage over them.
I think that's there.
Production-wise, can't fault it. It's a lovely looking game in a small box. You get a lot for the size of the box. Can't fault that at all. But I just think the theme feels a bit tectonic. Could be any theme. You could be building a skyscraper in Manhattan. Could be making burgers in a burger bar. It's just a production game at the end of the day. The Russian theme just felt like it had been stapled on.
Yeah, I think it's nice, and then the artwork's really nice, and the components are really nice. But I think, I suppose that's tribute to all Euro games. Is most Euro games can be reskinned quite easily, but I think there's no real desire that this is about building the Red Cathedral. So I think that's there. So wrapping it all up, then, John.
I'd hesitate to play it again. I'd have to think twice about if it got brought to a table if I'd want to join in. Not saying it's a bad game because of that, but it's just not one that I would look to play and pull off a shelf.
I would also hesitate to play again. I played it twice. The first time it didn't really gel with me. Gave it a second go. Didn't improve my opinion about it any time when I played it the second time round. So I would hesitate to play this again.
Yeah. And so for me, I'm probably a little bit more positive than these two, but I would still hesitate to play this again. I would play it if somebody brought it out, or somebody wanted to be taught how to play it, or wanted a fourth to make it a 4-player game. But there's a lot of others that do very similar things that I would prefer to play over this, and that's by no fault. And I think actually what we've done there is controversial to the wider opinion. I think a lot of people have liked the game and like what it's doing, but I think sort of for us it's lacking something. That is, I can't quite put my finger on.
I would agree. There is something that just didn't hit it right for me, and what it is, I just can't say. I think it's the disconnect between the two bits. Maybe a bigger board would have done it. I don't know.
Yeah. No. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of We'll Play Again. If you haven't done so already, please check out other videos on the channel. Give us a like and a subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.